Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Aten in Total War Warhammer Pharaoh Dynasties. Aten is the second most powerful ancient legacy of Egypt. The most powerful one, by far and away, is the merchant. The amount of resources that the merchant gives you in a campaign is significant. And even if you don't necessarily need those resources, there's also a bunch of ancillaries, provincial effects that just give you such a stacking benefit that is hard to argue against him being by far and away the most powerful in the game. But then you have Aten, which you may want to play if you're either playing with a huge amount of starting resources or you're playing someone like Tasret or Amun-Mes, who can afford losing the merchant and playing with Akhenaten the Heretic. Aten the Heretic, rather. So you select this legacy, and how does it work? Well, when you select this legacy, you get to decide how you're going to customize Aten. Aten is two gods combined into the same effect. Now, what should you choose? Well, it depends on what you're really aiming for. What are your interests? Because you can combine any two gods. And I'd firmly recommend, if you're going to play this legacy, that you do have all of the gods enabled from the beginning of the campaign, all gods discovered from the beginning of a campaign through campaign customization. What are some of the best choices? Well, for me personally, it would either be a combination of Horus, who gives you a significant amount of movement range, movement after battle, speed, influence, reduces movement on land for enemy armies, and gives you that charge bonus. But basically, any god that gives you any kind of movement speed after battle can be useful. El can be really great as well, because he does give you that ancillary chance after battle. So Horus and El can be a really deadly combination. There's of course other gods that do provide such a benefit as well, like movement after battle, though not necessarily all of them will be providing the same kind of benefit in a campaign. You can also go with Inshu, who gives you captives taken after battle. But okay, let's say you're focusing on other things. Let's say you don't necessarily care about moving fast on the campaign map, or maybe you do pick a god like, say, El, who gives you that ancillary chance, because that's pretty useful. But what other option would you realistically have? What should you go for? Well, having workforce growth in provinces from shrines is always going to be useful, but who should you go for? Well, there's different kinds of benefits. So for instance, Isis would reduce the workforce cost for management and administration buildings. Ra would not give you that benefit, but however give you recruitment rank and melee defense, as well as damage resistance versus missiles, which can be particularly useful for Egypt, as you do have a bunch of units that do have lower armor, and Egypt is well known for having a huge amount of archers. Other things that can be useful, things like Poseidon. The reason Poseidon could be great, while he doesn't have the same movement range on land, he does give you the movement range on sea. And then you can also get battle loot for devoted generals. There's all kinds of benefits over here. I would say campaign movement range is pretty useful, because being able to fight a lot of battles very quickly is always going to be a benefit. Ancillary chance is going to be a benefit. Casualties post-battle is always going to be a benefit. Attrition immunity is always going to be a benefit. So what you decide to go for is going to depend on what you're interested in. Another thing you can do is also significantly increase your army capability. So for instance, you can go with, say, Apollo, who gives you 20% ammunition, range lethality, missile damage on recruitment for all units, reload speed for a prayer. That is pretty damn powerful with range units. However, people do talk about this idea like, oh, you should test archers in a notion of like, you should test archers in a campaign when they're heavily customized or vastly improved for gods. Well, you get other gods that can counter that as well. Like, you can think of someone like Ra, who's really a pretty crappy god, but he gives you that 24% damage resistance versus missiles. That's a prayer, not a devoted general benefit. So if you want to go into the game like, which general is the best from a military standpoint, there's all kinds of options. Like, you can go with Vlad. He gives you armor for the entire army. So, like, if you want to make them one of the most powerful ranged armies in the game, there are various options available in a campaign for that particular purpose. Which one? Yeah. So you can go with Set combined with Apollo. That would give you, let's consider this, that would give you missile range for armies within your territory. So, like, let's consider Set. Let's consider the best armies. So ranged armies, melee armies. You can go with Set. He gives you ammunition on recruitment, missile range for armies in region if you're playing defense, and then reload speed and range of lethality for your own generals. And then you combine that, of course, with Apollo for range of lethality, ammunition, reload speed, prayer, missile damage, and recruitment, and you can get a ridiculously powerful benefit in that respect. That is probably the way to go if you're looking to buff up your to buff up your ranged units. Probably the best way, unless I find a different benefit over here. There doesn't seem to be any. Okay, but how were you to counter that kind of benefit if you were looking at, say, having a really powerful melee army? Well, one of the things that's going to matter, let's say you're fighting against masses of missile units, which can do damage in a situation. Well, going for someone like Ra or someone like Moloch, who aren't necessarily great in other ways, but can give you that very significant benefit in terms of, reducing damage resistance, or Shauska. Again, damage resistance versus missiles, morale, workforce growth. It is the same kind of benefit. Like, in a lot of ways, they're not particularly great. I'm going to admit that. But you can always go for someone like Ra and combine it with someone like Moloch, get 50% damage resistance for missiles. So, by the way, for all the people saying, oh, archers can be OP, 50% missile damage resistance is ridiculous. Or you can go with something else. So let's say you go for someone like, is Moloch better than Ra? So you get workforce growth. You would get more workforce for growth. Experience could be useful. Let's say Moloch, right? You go for Moloch over there. But then you can get other things as well that can buff up your your melee units in different ways by potentially increasing their armor. So you can go with Anubis for the devoted general to gain 15 armor. Now, there is a bit of a problem with this, because it's only going to work for a devoted general, and armor isn't the be-all and end-all. Armor is useful, but there are ways to counter it. But at the same time, someone like Thought would also give you that melee lethality, or you could go with Anubis and say, like, you could combine all kinds of things right over here to get all kinds of different benefits for an army. Like, Horus is really great because he does give you that speed, so you'll be able to close in to the enemy in an actual battle. Though most of the time, I'm going to say this very clearly, the success or failure of a campaign is not determined by having one really powerful army. It's by having a good, powerful empire. One of the reasons things like workforce growth and movement speed and heavy units are so inherently great is because but especially economic benefits are so inherently great is because they allow you to maintain multiple armies, have more options in a campaign. The map is pretty large. Keep in mind that. And you're not going to maintain vast armies. You're not going to look at maintaining like 6-7 stacks in a campaign until much, much later on. And then you have to worry about the quality of those troops. Because it's one thing to maintain 7 stacks as tier 1 units, which get demolished in a battle, even if you bring 2 of them. But you gotta worry about other things. You could also go with Ares if you want to increase the melee lethality, though that's not particularly great as far as I see it, though it is at least a prayer. So personally, I would go, if I was going with the 10, what I would do is get Horus over here in Egypt, and then get someone like El, or, if I wanted to increase workforce growth, I could get other things. So, again, depends on what you're dealing with. So let me show you what happens in the long term in this campaign. Let me talk about the city, of course, of Akhenaten. Seriously, I'm struggling with this pronunciation, but Aten city. Let's go with that particular city. What is available over there, and what is actually available with Aten as a god once you do, once you do get him, like what kind of tiers. Like until tier 3, you will get the same kind of benefits as you would like the 2 gods selected. You will get those benefits, and then will increase their benefits. And then once you get to a high enough level, you can have 2 devoted generals. You're gonna miss 1 devoted general that you can get in other campaigns, but you can have 2 devoted generals with some really, really powerful effects. So let me show you a campaign I've played with Aten as Tostret, though she ended up dying very, very quickly in that campaign. So in this campaign, turn 25, well, this has certainly been an experience because I enabled dying of old age at like past age 30, and then I made it so that 1 turn is 1 year. Yeah, people have been dying left and right. The court is a mess, the campaign map is a mess, the Pharaoh died in 5 turns. It's been an experience. Tostret is long dead. And yeah, it's certainly been creating a bit of an experience. Like, look at all the faction leaders, and mind you, none of these guys have actually died in battle. No, I am not exaggerating on that at all. It's just like a non-stop journey. Probably don't play with that. Like, don't set campaign customization over here in terms of like dying of old age to low. If you're gonna make things faster, set that at least to medium. Believe me, you will. The game is not designed to handle that. But okay, talking about Aten. So you have the city over here, which you can only take if you're worshipping Aten. So you want the city, you want Aten, you need to worship him. So what are we gonna get over here? Well, it is a single region settlement. That is also a cultural center, so if you want civilization to prosper, you may want to worship Aten for the civilization points, the 45 civilization points that you can get from this city. That is in itself a very significant benefit to Aten. So it's all these kind of benefits that you can get. You only have 2 outposts over here, though of course you can also get the Shrine of Aten. Then you have enough building slots to both get the temple, which gives you 140 favor. Aten is going to require a lot of favor, so you can expect to build a lot of temples, and you can expect to also build the Grand Temple of Aten over here in his city. This will give you 30% food production in this particular province, and given there's a lot of food buildings over here you can construct, this might generate a lot of food in your campaign once you've built it up properly. So as Tostret, Amon Mess, like, you would want to get the grain pit to a high level, and you can generate a ton and a ton and a ton of food over here. But in terms of the unique structures, you do get that Grand Temple, and beyond that, it also gives you 150 gold income in this particular province once you do build that Grand Temple. Then you also have the Great Archives, which give you legitimacy, 15 civilization points, victory points, 15% production to all resources, and then 10 diplomatic relations with all factions. That is a very significant landmark. It is all very useful. So on that city alone, it can be very strong to worship Aten. But let's talk about him. I've deliberately put it off in this campaign, though it has certainly hurt me. So over here, worshipping Horus and what was it, El, regardless, in this particular case, worshipping Horus and El, I think it was, I've gotten 66% movement and speed, land, attrition immunity, melee attack, 18 influence, 60% upkeep reduction for bodyguards, 40% movement on land reduced for enemies, and I also get 25% movement after battle, 40% captives taken. And these are just the benefits that you can get up to tier 3. At tier 4, 5, 6, and 7, you get different blessings for 10 that are randomized. I think it depends on what choices you've made. But for instance over here, right? We already have the prayer giving 66%. But this one can also increase this by 24%. So you consider the insanity over here, right? You have these two and they stack. Pretty sure about that. And that's just one choice. Then you can get increased replenishment or 100 experience per turn. Now, it is dependent on what you choose. So it can either be from a shrine for armies and region. You can either pray for it, or a devoted general can get that benefit. Let's say we get the experience per turn over here, right? For that particular benefit from shrines. We can then also get other things, like another devoted general if we go for it. So we can get 3 of them, actually. But by default, like, this is going to be randomized. So I would say that you may want to reload over here. Like, you may want to save these effects until you're at a high level and then go for these effects. Then we can go even further. We can get, happiness and province from generals or influence. We already have enough influence, so it's not really a problem. And then melee defense. There's all kinds of benefits that you can go for. Some benefits will benefit your economy on a factional level. Some benefits will benefit this particular city. Like, if I were to reload this save and just go for these again, I would get different benefits, different choices, various economic, military benefits, and then you categorize them from shrine benefits, prayer benefits, and devoted general benefits. That is how Aten works. This is why this is the second most powerful benefit, second most powerful ancient legacy of Egypt, and honestly one of the most powerful in the game, because you're not just buffing up. You're not getting something like, that's unrelated to your already existing mechanics. No, you're literally just buffing up your religion to a huge level. Yes, you can argue, well, if I were to worship 3 individual gods, that would be pretty powerful. But keep in mind a couple of downsides in that. While Aten does require you to gain more favor to get all of these full effects, that is true. Though, keep in mind, tier 3 will only require 800. The fact that you have all of your shrines working towards, and temples working towards one particular benefit, will mean that you will actually get him to the tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, tier 6, 7 much faster than you would in other campaigns. And you don't have to worry about unlocking the god dedication slots. I feel like religion and Pharaoh could be improved. But on top of that, you do get far bigger benefits than with the other gods. Or you get benefits, like what can happen, like, sure, you could argue, reasonably so, like, well, if I wanted a lot of movement range, I could just go for 3 gods. They do give me that, but that's not really that's not all there is to it. Because yes, you might potentially get more movement range if you were to worship 3 individual gods, and then those benefits would stack. But practically, you'd have to build different shrines, different temples, and realistically, you are not going to get that significant benefit, because having to pray at all of them, you're going to lose so much time just doing the prayers. So from a practical standpoint, Aten is really powerful, very strong, simple to use. You are losing the merchant, so that is a significant economic downgrade. Gotta be aware of that. I would say, however, from a short campaign situation, the merchant is far more powerful. From a long campaign, especially someone like Tosret or Amun Mess, not so much as Seti, though even Seti can get a lot of post-battle inherently, so imagine buffing that up. It can be worth going for a 10. You do get an extra Seti, you have an easier time with prosperity and civilization, which actually can be a pretty big deal. Like, if we look at the prosperity over here, right? The cult centers that do exist, like having over here just 10 points may seem insignificant, but you gotta understand, like, the difference between prosperity and crisis can just be a couple of points at certain times. So be aware of that. That's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.